The Dark Ranger is one of the sexiest heroes in Warcraft 3, admirable in full pixelated state, in state-of-the-art 2002 graphics. The reforged graphics version of the Dark Ranger sadly does little to improve upon your wildest imaginations. The Dark Ranger is also one of the most legendary Warcraft 3 heroes because of her ability to allow a player to race bend and essentially control multiple factions via her charm ability. This is a spotlight about her, and I'm gonna tell you all about the Dark Ranger. She can control armies of the living dead like she was born to it. And spoiler, she wasn't. This is a story spoiler, sorry about that. Dark Ranger is one of your most requested heroes for me to cover next in one of these spotlights, and thus it is time to open up on all of Dark Ranger's secrets and use cases in this Warcraft 3 hero spotlight. Let's get into it. As is usual with these spotlights, let's dive a little bit into the lore of things. Now, the lore for the Dark Ranger in Warcraft 3 is relatively simple, but if you actually look at the Dark Rangers in the World of Warcraft universe and all the stories that came after that, with their most iconic leading role Dark Ranger, I think it's gonna break your head. So we're gonna keep it, for the most part, pretty simple. There's even people that deny that WoW lore ever happened and that only follow the canon of Warcraft 3, but I'm not gonna wade knees deep into that debate. Dark Rangers are a hero unit in Warcraft 3, with their most iconic member being Sylvanas. So much of the Dark Ranger lore will deal with Sylvanas' story arc in Warcraft 3. Sylvanas is known by many names, including such names as the Banshee Queen, the Dark Lady, Queen of the Forsaken, and the Ranger General of Silvermoon. Let's find out how she was turned from the latter into the formers. While noting the story arc and development of Dark Rangers, it is a bit of a tragedy to realize that much of their destiny has been forged by acts done against them, not by acts of their own volition. However, eventually the will of the Forsaken would see onto them a kind of independence that allowed them to reshape their destinies going forward. However, firstly, let's discuss the origins. Dark Rangers are the hero form of Silvermoon elves who defended Quel'Thalas from a Scourge invasion in the Warcraft 3 campaign, led by a somewhat rebellious and rambunctious teenager called Arthas Menethil. He was a crown prince of Lordaeron, and he cooked up some mischief pertaining to some trinket in Northrend that he then brought with him, and then he gave his father some trouble, as sons do. Much more about Arthas and the Death Knights later on in a future spotlight video about the Death Knights. This is not his story, though he did start the Dark Ranger story arc. So Arthas the Death Knight, spoiler, defeated, killed and resurrected Sylvanas and her fellow Quel'Thalas elves after Sylvanas organized the doomed defenses of Silvermoon. Rather than grant her a warrior's death, Arthas vindictively and faithfully resurrected her corpse, granting her a glimmer of life through the cursed existence of being a banshee. As it turns out, stories of Sylvanas' death had been greatly exaggerated. Now forced to be a cog in the gears of the inexorable Scourge and their advance over Azeroth, Sylvanas resented her haunted existence. She was bound to do Arthas' bidding as the Lich King strengthens his control over her and the rest of the Scourge, and as Ner'zhul from within Frostmourne Runesword whispered sweet nothings into the top of his dome. When Illidan and Arthas' paths crossed, it would culminate in Illidan, Kel'Thas and Lady Vashj channeling their powers to destroy Ner'zhul, the first Lich King, and the Frozen Throne and Arthas once and for all. But Malfurion would interrupt Illidan and prevented him from dealing the death blow. And yet, enough damage had been done to the throne and Arthas' control over the Scourge in order for the psychically powerful members of the Scourge, including Sylvanas and her Dark Ranger brethren, to free themselves from the shackles of the erstwhile ever-present control of the Lich King. The Banshee Queen would become the Queen of the Forsaken, now an independent undead faction that would no longer answer to the call of any other master ever again. The Dreadlords offered a deal to Sylvanas, but she declared she and her Forsaken Banshees would never be beholden to another master, and they went on to seek their own destiny. Since Dark Rangers are hired from the Tavern in Warcraft 3 melee multiplayer, I like to think that they are already the Forsaken version, as they are not recruited directly from the Undead faction and the Altar of Darkness. So they have already regained their free will to do as they want, waging war alongside the Scourge or against the Scourge. The Dark Rangers can make a compact with any of the four races, proving that their destiny is once again their own. Maybe one day I'll do a lore video on the rest of Dark Ranger and the rest of Warcraft 3 and so on, but for now we're gonna go to more practical applications of information about the Dark Ranger in Warcraft 3 one-on-one multiplayer melee games. The Dark Ranger is an interesting hero that can very flexibly represent entirely different game theory ideas. Dark Rangers can take on the role of an early momentum-based hero that attempts to close out the game before it's too late, or they can function as a support hero that joins and complements an existing hero combination to patch up a certain weakness or offer some extra utility. Finally, she can even be a late-game scaling monster that needs time to unlock one of the most powerful ultimate abilities in the game, Charm, which I ranked as tier S in my video titled "So, I ranked all Warcraft 3 ultimate abilities." Sorry, it was written in all caps, so I wanted to encapsulate that for the blind. My suggestion is to never count Dark Ranger out as a pick in any position, be it in first, second, or as a third hero. The Dark Ranger, like every other Warcraft 3 hero, has 3 abilities and an ultimate ability as well, which is their 4th, which means I lied 3 seconds ago, but what I meant is 3 basic abilities. Her first ability is Silence. You can see just how effective that is. Silence stops all enemies in a circular area of effect from casting spells for a period of time. Silence has a reduced duration on resistant enemies such as heroes. Silence is also dispellable by units such as dryads, priests, wisps, destroyers, shamans, and spirit walkers. It does not pierce magic immunity. Leveling up Silence increases the size of the area and the duration of the silence. If you manage to land Silence on heroes as well as the units that are meant to dispel it, well, you've ensured a full-length application of Silence, which makes it the most effective. It lasts pretty long. Most effects that are disables but are not stuns last far longer than stuns because they're weaker than stuns. There's counterplay, or the enemy hero or unit can still do things like move around and perform basic attacks. This is why at level 1 Silence lasts for a whopping 16 seconds on normal units, 8 on heroes. Very powerful. At level 2 it's 20 seconds with 10 on heroes, and at level 3 it's 24 seconds with 12 seconds being on heroes. Silence can be cast from a range of 900 away. The 900 range remains consistent as you level up, but the circular area of effect of the Silence gets bigger. That means that effectively your maximum range is higher than 900 range at level 1 because the circle around the center point of your cast, which is at 900 range, extends beyond the center point of your cast. And that only gets bigger. So in a way, you could say that the maximum casting range of Silence goes up as you level up. But you would be lying, because the casting range remains 900. However, it can reach further, which is what I'm trying to say. Silence is best cast immediately into a fight, before the opponent gets to cast any spells. The second best time to cast Silence is after spells have been used, but before they would come off cooldown again, so that you can prevent, with a good timing, their second cast of a spell. Silence can also be coordinated with extra spells that would normally get countered. For example, you can silence their paladin as you coil nova their archmage. Or you silence Druids of the Talon right as you also lightning shield them, so that they can't use crowd form to self-dispel the lightning, causing damage and mayhem in their lines. You can also silence wisps to prevent them from detonating and blowing up in your face, which would allow them to deny the experience of you getting them as a kill, and you're preventing them from detonating and you losing mana and buffs and so on. There are many creative applications of Silence that can have a devastating effect on your opponent's ability to act optimally in a battle. Her second ability is Black Arrow. Black Arrow is an orb effect ability, which means that it attaches a magical effect to the Dark Ranger's standard auto attacks. You can manually cast Black Arrow by using the hotkey to fire a single shot of Black Arrow, or you can right-click the ability icon to turn on or off autocast, which will attach it to all auto attacks, or none when it's off. There's unfortunately no keybind to activate and deactivate the toggle of autocasting, like Dota 2 has. When used, Black Arrow adds a small amount of damage and applies a 2-second debuff that instantly creates a dark minion out of the corpse of an enemy or neutral unit when you kill it. The dark minion that spawns from the corpse of such a unit gets stronger in damage and health the higher level point of Black Arrow that you have. At level 1, Black Arrow deals 2 damage and will summon a lesser dark minion. At level 2, Black Arrow deals 10 damage and will summon a dark minion, not a lesser dark minion. But here it gets funny. The range of level 2 Black Arrow and level 3 is 700 range, which is 100 more than her auto attack and than level 1 Black Arrow. More about this later. At level 3, 20 damage and a greater dark minion with even more health and damage. You know those videos that say more about that later, and then you end up wondering when more is coming? And you're wondering if you should suspend your attention to be ready for the next thing coming? But now actually, when I said more about that later, that's actually now, which is later, but not a lot later. So I wanted to take away that impatience of waiting for the additional info drop on the 600 and the 700. I'm gonna actually explain it now if you're ready for it. All right, let's go into it. So if you right-click autocast toggle the Black Arrow, you will continue to attack with your maximum attack range, which is 600, even though the level 2 and the 3 Black Arrow ability offer a 700 attack range. The only way to circumvent this is to manually cast Black Arrow, whether or not you have the toggle on or off. This means you have to click the hotkey for Black Arrow or to left-click on the portrait, and then click on the target to attack them. When you do that, you will attack with 700 attack range. So you'll get the extra 100 range. Black Arrow should be turned off while DPSing at level 1, as its damage is weak with just 2 points of damage. You're mostly using it for the Black Arrow effect of summoning its skeleton. So if you can, and you have the presence of mind to do so, you should turn it on manually per kill with the 2-second grace period to farm the skeletons. Or at least, if you're not quite as nimble with it, turn off the autocast for the first half of HP of a creep, and then turn it on at the second half. You won't be as accurate, you won't save as much mana, but you'll save more mana than if you just always leave it on. You will get all the skeletons you want, but you'll run out of mana. Her third ability is Life Drain. Life Drain absorbs the life essence of a target enemy unit by taking health points from it every second and giving them to the Dark Ranger. From a starting casting range of 500, which is relatively short, little shorter than her auto attack range, it nonetheless has a tether break range of 800, which means they need to move away at least 300 units in order to interrupt the cast. It lasts for 8 seconds when allowed to fully channel and will deal 30 damage per second and then 45 and 60 at the next 2 levels. It costs 50 mana to cast, and the amount of life that you gain is the same as the amount of damage that you've dealt. When magic resistance comes into play, thereby reducing the amount of damage that it will do on a hero such as a mountain giant with full upgrades or a hero, she will also leech less life, so it is completely connected. Life Drain received sizable buffs recently. On 10 April 2018, the damage of Life Drain increased by about 9 to 20% on the 3 respective levels, and the mana cost went down from 75 to 50 mana as a total casting cost per Life Drain. Despite this, Life Drain rarely, if ever, gets picked. Walking out of range or interrupting her channel in a different way are direct counters to this spell effect, and you may need to self-interrupt as a Dark Ranger user sometimes to hit the perfect time of silence. Lastly, it loses half of its value if the Dark Ranger is full life during a fight, as you would not be getting any lifesteal from it. You would just be dealing damage. She is a ranged hero, so she is less likely to take damage than a melee hero would. This ability would be insanely broken on something like a Blade Master or a Demon Hunter. This illustrated intrinsically anti-synergistic nature of Life Drain was partially addressed when it received a big quality of life buff recently in a patch on 28th of May 2019. Life Drain would from then forwards also apply the Dark Minion effect on the current rank of Black Arrow during its duration, though it wouldn't have the 2-second grace period. So if Life Drain would lead to a kill, uninterrupted, it would summon a Dark Minion. It still makes it a weird ability because you either want to finish the whole duration of Life Drain for maximum damage and life gain, or you want to make sure it ends prematurely so that you can get the skeleton of the Black Arrow effect. When using it, my suggestion is to not worry about the Black Arrow effect too much at all and just use Life Drain optimally for HP exchange when you're damaged and you want to deal damage. And any Dark Minions you get, just taking them as an unexpected bonus. After all, once you finish Life Drain and resume auto-attacking with Black Arrow, the effect is once again applied anyway, so there will only be a short window of time where you don't have a Black Arrow effect going in between the end of the Life Drain and the start of your first Black Arrow connecting. And finally, her final ability, Charm. I rated Charm as tier S in my ultimate tier list video, and it's easy to see why. For just 150 mana and at a staggeringly eye-watering 45 seconds of cooldown, from a range of 700 units away, you can cast Charm to instantly wrest control of a target enemy unit or creep at level 5 or below, and it will become permanently yours. It doesn't work on level 6 and above creeps, it doesn't work on mechanicals, and it doesn't work on heroes. But it does work on magic immunes like Dryads and Destroyers. This is because Charm, like many ultimate abilities, if not all, for heroes, has a hidden magic immune piercing modifier. I actually looked this up and it's called the universal ability type. Charm can be also used to hijack an enemy worker and build up a whole base of their race. You can even end up training their heroes. This was famously performed by Moon on Twisted Meadows in one of the most iconic moments of Warcraft 3 history, and it is called the Blood Castle game. In that, Moon Dark Rangered first and he ended up getting a castle, and would then go on to train a Blood Mage and an Archmage, beating his human opponent with his own heroes. Unlike in StarCraft 1, when you steal an enemy worker and start building the town, you don't gain an extra max 100 or 200 max supply with the additional race to work with. In StarCraft 1, you could use a Dark Archon and you could have 200 population in your supply, and then you could get another 200 population in the Zerg supply. That doesn't work in Warcraft 3, you remain limited to the standard 100 max supply. Alright, let's get to some stats. Everyone's favorite segment. Her primary attribute is agility, which means she gains bonus damage, 1 damage per 1 extra point of agility. She has 18 strength at level 1, gaining 1.9 per level, 21 agility, gaining 1.5 per level, and 15 intelligence, gaining 2.6 per level. This gives her a standard attribute scaling of 6 per level, which is the same as a Circlet of Nobility, and is in fact the norm among all heroes in Warcraft 3. There are a few deviants, but she is not one of them. At least not in the stats department. Her base cooldown time, or BCD, which in Dota is called BAT, base attack time, which can be somewhat translated to DPS, or let's say the base DPS of a hero, is 2.42. That makes her the second highest BCD in the 24 hero roster of Warcraft 3, and therefore the second worst in the game. Higher is worse. Only the Alchemist has a higher and therefore worse BCD. It is worth noting that for the past couple of hero spotlights, some YouTube commenters have been trying to help improve my understanding of the effect of BCD and buff items when pertaining to BCD. I previously overemphasized on pointing out how it correlates to attack speed modifiers, such as agility and gloves of haste, but commenters such as Robin Spend Low 9229 and others have successfully and correctly pointed out lower number BCDs benefit the most from combat items in general, which boost damage or attack speed. So, Claws of Attack and Gloves are better on low BCD heroes. And that means that Dark Ranger is one of the poorest users of damage boosting items. Next, her turn rate is 0.6, which is good. Her attack range is 600, which is standard for a ranged, and her vision range is 1800 by day and 800 by night, which is standard for most heroes. Her movement speed is 320, which is fast, and the same as a Blade Master, Archmage, and a Demon Hunter. Her armor at level 1 is 4, to be exact 4.3, and her starting damage is 23 to 33. She starts with 550 health with a 0.9 per second regen, and enjoys the Blight bonus, even though she is not technically an undead starter hero. So she gets another 2 health per second on Blight, even if you pick her as an orc and then you go attack an undead base. Her starting mana is 225 and she gains 0.76 per second. Alright, let's go to a little bit of a deeper description of her use cases. Dark Ranger is very flexible. She is used as a first, second and a third hero, and is relatively unique in this so far, since my previous 5 hero spotlights, Blade Master, Pitlord, Archmage, Warden and Dreadlord, have not really seen such versatility so far. Nonetheless, she is more rare than the other 5. Well, let's get into it. Dark Ranger as a first hero is most commonly seen by Night Elves historically. She'll be combined with Archers. Dark Ranger and Archers would be the ranged force, and their goal would be to create lesser dark minions to kill creeps and then tank damage from other creeps, and thus result in creating a force of momentum. She's vulnerable against attacks that target her archers, as Dark Ranger has little utility to dissuade attackers except by leveraging sheer damage. You can use Dark Minions to try and perform surrounds, do body blocks, or to inflict damage, and the archers will shoot at targets as well. But if a concerted force is expressed upon her archers, pretty much it's just a problem of scouting and positioning, and you need to run away before they even get there. Dark Ranger is best as a first hero on defensive maps with lots of little creeps, so she can summon a large undead army of Dark Minions that have a timed life of 80 seconds. Usually brute forcing an expansion for yourself to just use sheer force to protect it, and then brute forcing an attack on the enemy counter expansion is a very common way to see Dark Ranger go down. For instance, in the Night Elf versus Human matchup on Echo Isles. You'll have 5 to 10 skeletons in tow at all times, which maybe gives you the amount of power that you need to defend your expo and take down the Earth's ones. It is common to want to solo the Dark Ranger hero without any other backup heroes, as this allows her to accrue all the experience necessary to as quickly as possible get level 6 and to unlock that very powerful ultimate ability, Charm. Historically, in the meta of pro level Warcraft 3, it's only Night Elf that has been able to make Dark Ranger as a first hero work. As a second hero, it is mostly an occasional entree into the meta, usually never standard, but more of a off-meta pick. She has often been theory crafted to work for the Orc matchup against Night Elf when Night Elf was spamming Druids of the Talon during the oppressive Talon meta against Orc. But in truth, it doesn't actually work. It was one of the common "just do this" that people used to say against DOTT. More about that in my other recent video, the top 5 of the most meta-defining creative innovations and the Druid of the Talon strategy that featured in it. Just do this! Dark Ranger was one of those. You would silence the Druids of the Talon and then you just kill them, but in reality it didn't really work out. She was too vulnerable to mana burn for that to work, and silence is too ephemeral and short-lasting to really offer much against DOTT. She's occasionally used by human in an Archmage Dark Ranger combination, usually with some form of an early tier 2 rush. If the human has the means to kill units quickly, then the Dark Ranger can use those kills and to summon more skeletons out of it. And because she's a ranged damage dealer, she can poke from afar, just like the Naga or the Firelord would, but working a little differently than those two heroes. She's occasionally used by Orc against human in the Farseer Dark Ranger combination when going up against a human fast expansion at tier 1. Orc has options to hire a Shadowhunter or a Tauren Chieftain, however, they need to be trained for 60 seconds or so from the altar, and the Dark Ranger can be picked up immediately. Because of this, FSDR has been used sometimes against human. Elf has occasionally used Dark Ranger 2nd together with a Keeper, usually as an all-in, something like Keeper level 3, 8 archers, and then Dark Ranger 2nd to try and pressure a human or an Orc player, or perhaps even an Undead. But it is quite rare, all of these cases. And finally, Undead has occasionally, and maybe most commonly, used Death Knight into Dark Ranger, rebuilding a little bit of that campaign drama, against Orcs when Orcs have played a Farseer Headhunter opener. These days, the meta has shifted again more towards Death Knight into Lich, into Dark Ranger, but we have seen a whole lot of Death Knight into Dark Ranger, into Lich from players such as Happy in the last few years. Even in Undead Mirror, we have sometimes seen Happy and 120, the best Chinese Undead, go head-to-head in a one-on-one where both are playing Death Knight Fiend openers, and then one player goes Lich second and the other goes Dark Ranger. This is a couple of years back, but because I've seen it at high level, I can at least tell you guys that DR second is not a crazy idea. You can let it cook. Dark Ranger as a third hero is perhaps most common these days. She's very frequently used by Undead as a third hero to bring in that Silence and Black Arrow, and that is in fact a super standard combination of heroes for Undead to get. Death Knight into Lich into Dark Ranger. Very rarely, any of the 4 races might go a Dark Ranger third to counter something like Dragonhawks, as Dragonhawks have an anti-air ability called Aerial Shackles, which is a spell that can be interrupted by a silence. Overall, what's good to remember is that Dark Ranger uses existing momentum to create extra unit pressure, So there's an existing advantage which builds a bridge towards allowing Dark Ranger to be used, and then to expand upon that and build a little bit of momentum and tempo of her own. This makes her intrinsically very different than a Fire Lord who creates the momentum with the lava spawn summons, and the Fire Lord is the bridge builder towards some kind of cheesy finish, such as Mass Raiders or Mass Wyverns or something of the sort. It is important to recognize the role of heroes and to know whether they are momentum users or momentum builders, and then to build a strategy that accordingly fits with that. Dark Ranger has two common skill builds. As a first hero, the standard build is to go Black Arrow first, then Silence, then Black Arrow, then Silence, then Black Arrow, then Charm, and then finishing up with the final Silence. Life Drain is not part of the standard build. You might be able to make it work, but it pretty much just isn't the reason why we pick her. Her second standard build is Dark Ranger as a third hero. You would go Silence first, usually, and then Black Arrow, then Silence, and then probably Black Arrow, Black Arrow. Then go with Charm and again pick Silence at level 7. I've talked a little bit about the role of Dark Ranger in a standard game of Warcraft 3. Let's go a little deeper. What are the primary objectives? How do you get the most out of Dark Ranger? When she's your first hero, what is your plan? Do you creep or do you play aggressively, and do you expand? So as a first hero, you'll pretty much always just focus on creeping a lot. If you can, all the way till level 5. You'll throw up an expansion at level 2, 2.5 or 3, and you'll scout regularly with dark minions, which have about 80% duration left, so that they have enough time left of their summoned life in order to get across the map and scout. Most maps, the scout distance from main base to main base for a worker is about 50 to 60 seconds. A dark minion lasts 80 seconds. They're a little faster than a worker, so if there's 80% left, they got about 60 plus seconds left in order to get across the map, which is more than enough to check a main and 1 or 2 other creep spots. You'll be looking to see if they're teching up, which units, and whether they're expanding. You can launch a full-scale dark minion assault alongside your main army on a counter expansion from an opponent, for instance an undead or a human opponent. Or maybe you'll use your skeletons, archers and Dark Ranger to defend your own fledgling Tree of Life from attacks with your brute force defenses. Your goal in winning is generally to get Dark Ranger to level 6, so Dark Ranger play generally uses a lot of tier 1 units and a lot of tier 2 units and doesn't play too greedily. A common follow-up hero to Dark Ranger, if you are going to get a second hero, has been the Pandaren Brewmaster, offering some extra damage to mechanicals such as siege engines if they want to tank you, and also against casters. It is a very powerful combination to use Dark Ranger with a large silence on human caster rifle armies, so that none of the priests can heal or dispel and none of the sorks can slow, and then to follow up with a big Drunken Haze Fire Breath combination from a Pandaren Brewmaster to really give them a terrible time. It is important to remember that there are tempo builder heroes, such as Keeper and Firelord, that can create summons and pressure to cover for good units coming out later. And Dark Ranger really isn't one of these primarily. Dark Ranger classifies primarily as a tempo user and only slightly as a tempo builder. So you'll sooner go mass archers, mass hunters and dryads than you would go for like some kind of late game comp and try to rush all the way to fast tech into bears or even a chimera hippo army, or as we call it, chippo. Mass units creates the tempo. The Dark Ranger uses it and then furthers it. And this covers for you to build an expansion or to play strongly defensively or aggressively. Solo hero allows you to turn the continuous tempo that you're churning out into a late game scaling plan, which is into charm, which is your win condition. How do you fight with the Dark Ranger? Well, you focus fire all of your ranged units and the Dark Ranger onto enemy units one by one to get more dark minions ASAP. You open fights with silence and you cast it again when it runs out. Once you get to level 6, you'll often disable Black Arrow so that you can save mana, and your playstyle may change entirely away from tempo and bridge building and momentum building all the way into attrition. You would use things like Boots of Speed, Staff of Teleport, Staff of Preservation and Town Portal in order to steal enemy units with charm and then run away and save them. Doing this forces an opponent to attack you, as people generally hate getting their shit stolen all the time, and then you can play from a defensive position at your Moonwells or at your expansion and force them to attack into you, because a war of attrition is won by a Dark Ranger. When she is a third hero, you'll generally add her to your army right away before an attack. You hire her from the tavern and then you attack, picking silence first. If you feel like the timing is better for you to spend a little bit more time creeping, you'll generally get her as a third hero and creep a bit more first. You'll take Black Arrow level 1, and then you'll attack the opponent once you get Dark Ranger to level 2. We always have a section about desirable permanent items on the hero, but Dark Ranger does not particularly need or use any permanent items particularly well. She is the second worst user of damage buffing items, including attack speed and damage, doesn't particularly need lots of mana if you manage your Black Arrow well, and she's not really a primary focus target in general as well, so she doesn't really require bonus health via strength or health giving items. It is fine to add Boots of Quel'Thalas and Slippers of Agility and Claws and Gloves, but it is not the best. And even the ubiquitous Orb of Venom is significantly worse on her than on other heroes, as Life Drain would prevent you from using Orb of Venom auto attacks, and orb effects don't stack, so you cannot turn on Black Arrow and still benefit from the poison aspect of Orb of Venom. Because of this, generally my list is empty. Because she is a hero that uses tempo and enhances it as well, she will focus more on consumables. However, if I had to name any items, I would say her primary item is Staff of Preservation, Staff of Teleportation, and Staff of Sanctuary if you play her as human. These are perhaps the good items we like to see the most in Dark Ranger, so that you can staff charmed units or indeed any units. The popular consumable list is a little bit more extensive, but still pretty limited compared to some other heroes. She likes Town Portal if she was made as a first hero, as a Dark Ranger ranged army cannot be called out without a TP in a bad spot. She likes Scroll of Healing, as she generally has a large posse of friends with her, such as archers, dryads, and huntresses, and Scroll of Healing is good for those types of armies. Finally, she likes an Invulnerability Potion. I think this item is going to be on every hero of the Hero Spotlight list. Generally, it's just that good. It's 150 gold and it might save you a hero. In terms of spell buffs, nothing in particular is particularly good. It's fine to rejuvenate and roar her, obviously, but there's no particular buff that stands out where I can say that it's exceptional on her. She's an army user and an army builder, and therefore consumables that boost your army, such as aura items or heal scrolls or protection scroll, are the best. When it comes to countering the Dark Ranger, if you're playing against one, here's what you should do in combat. Dispel her dark minions, dispel her silence, spread your dispellers, fire apart so they don't get silenced altogether and they can help dispel one another before dispelling others. You should probably carry potions of invulnerability in order to save key spells and be able to use them at the right time. Oftentimes, in an explosive Orc versus Undead battle, the Dark Ranger will get off a silence on the Shadow Hunter and the Tauren Chieftain, and then that means there's no Hex, no Heal Wave, and no War Stomp. You'll often see Orcs take the drastic decision to use 150 gold invulnerability potion on the Tauren Chieftain just to get the War Stomp off in a good location and to remove the silence that would otherwise last another 7 seconds. You can also use Channeling Interrupts to stop Drain Life, if that's the ability she picked. And if you're going up against a Dark Ranger level 6, simply stop using units. Or use mechanical units. If you bring units to a fight, she's gonna steal them, and that sucks. So just don't use units anymore. Or, if that's not a possibility, try to have one explosive game-ending fight rather than infrequently skirmishing with her every minute, which would allow her to keep making use of that ability. We've gotten to the section near the end where I go through all the special interactions that pertain to a hero, all the special tricks. But unfortunately, my bag of tricks for the Dark Ranger is really thin. I have just one trick, and I've already told you before. You can manually cast Black Arrow level 2 and 3 for 100 extra attack range. I personally am not aware of any other special tricks or special interactions with the Dark Ranger. She's pretty straightforward. The hardest thing about her is timing her silence right. And for the rest, she is everything I told you so far. Alright guys, that was it. The Dark Ranger, the erstwhile Ranger General of Silvermoon, turned into a Banshee, turned into the Banshee Queen, and with her army of Dark Ranger, has now been covered in a hero spotlight. Hope you understand this somewhat more uncommonly seen hero a little bit more. I've now done the Blade Master, the Pit Lord, the Archmage, the Warden, the Dreadlord, and now the Dark Ranger. All are in a playlist on this channel here on Grubby Talks. There are 18 heroes left undone. If I don't finish the series, which hero do you think needs to be covered next? Absolutely. Let me know in the comments. And if there's any tricks about the Dark Ranger that you think I missed, let me know in the comments as well. I love reading it. If you want to see the rest of this series and more about Warcraft 3 and other gaming commentary, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing this video with your friends and your enemies who may want to learn more about Warcraft 3, and I'll feel greatly encouraged. Thank you very much, and have a good one. See you next time.